I don't know, but I'm not telling anyone. I have no idea if it will work. I'm trusting in all my departments and all the actors and all the writers and camera people and grips and electricians to make it work. Nothing says it's working. We had no idea, the actors, myself, the producers, that Spider-Man would be so well received by everybody. And I've never really been involved with a hit movie before, you know, something that so many people go to see. It's hard to understand when a lot of people like the movie, you know, which was a new experience for me. It's hard to know what the difference between that is and when one audience you're with likes the movie. It's hard for me to imagine, oh, I guess I should be 10 times happier because 10 times the people have seen this movie. It's not really true. The experience that I have is making the movie. So I want the people that I'm working with to be proud of their work on screen. But mostly, I do want the audience to have a good experience with the picture.
I want Spider-Man!
Every fan had a Spider-Man movie in their head, and we just had to hope that once the lights went down and the film came on, that they would go with and embrace the Spider-Man movie that was in Sam Raimi's head. And, you know, fortunately they did.
What's unique about Spider-Man is that it starts at the age of 2 or earlier, and it goes all the way to people my age and older. The appeal of the character, the Peter Parker in all of us, was a kind of a thing that was male, female, young, old. It has all the elements. So when you walk into the movie house and the main title goes on and they erupt, it's like a rock concert. You knew the expectation was there, but it was even more fascinating to see that at the end and see this incredible depth and emotional investment that we all go through in this particular movie.
Whatever life holds in store for me, I will never forget these words. With great power comes great responsibility. This is my gift, my curse.
Sam being, you know, very well versed in the Spider-Man comics and especially to the early days in the 60s of the Spider-Man comics. So he kind of covers the people who are going to know the ins and outs of the comic books.
The Marvel artists and writers have done a great job throughout the decades. I know because I'm a big fan myself. And so there's a tremendous amount of material to draw upon, and the character is so clear. I think it's not difficult to make a picture once you understand the character, who that person is.
Everybody loves a hero. People line up for him, cheer them, scream their names, and years later they'll tell how they stood in the rain for hours just to get a glimpse of the one who taught him to hold on a second longer.
I think really what makes a comic book a good movie is if the story is classic in nature, Shakespearean in nature. But more importantly, what makes a great comic book movie is the alter ego of the superhero.
When I did Spider-Man, I wanted to make him a character people could believe in. So I figured I won't make him the handsomest guy in the world or the strongest. I won't make him rich. He'll have money worries. I can relate to that because I had money problems in those days. I said he won't be that popular. I mean, it's not easy for him to get a girl. He has to worry about getting dates. And I figured that most of the kids or the teenagers or the young adults who read those stories would be able to relate to that because life isn't easy for anybody, really. So that's what I did, and I'm so happy it worked. Originally, my publisher never thought it would work. He said, people just want to see the hero fighting the villain. They're not interested in all that other stuff. So I must admit, I took a little bit of a chance.
There was no reason why Spider-Man should have worked. I mean, I'm sure that Sony was terrified. You know, I mean, the Batman franchise had flamed out. The Superman franchise had flamed out before that. You know, was the world ready to see a guy wearing a mask? And what you had was something that was really close to the comic in terms of its tone and its spirit. That's the romance of comics. More so than anything else, is you have to get the audience to believe that this person exists.
That's what makes Spider-Man a great movie, is because you have that emotional, pull, and they're real people, and then all these fantastical things are happening to them. But at the base of it, it's just like human relationships, and it's a pretty simple story. But it's what holds the movie together is that. Otherwise, you just get an action film, and who really cares to go see just that?
I signed on for 3 of these movies before I even did the first one. And that's a nervous thing to do, to sign on to scripts you haven't even seen. And so I was very eagerly awaiting the arrival of the script. And I got the script, and I read it, and my first feeling was a feeling of relief because it was good. And my next feeling was of excitement because I was excited to get to work on it.
There were a lot of contributors to the story of this movie. We had a lot of great writers, from Michael Chabon to Alvin Sargent, David Koepp, Mr. Goff and Millar. A lot of different people brought things to the story. And it was really finding our way through these different ideas to the ones that reverberated, for me, the ones that reverberated with me. We found our way. There was no real formula.
I think we were governed by certain givens. We know Toby, and we know the age he is, and we know certainly the range, which is tremendous, that he can play. But it felt right to us that the next movie be about, okay, now he's accepted the mantle. He's been on that road for a while, and there are positives and negatives.
I don't know you. And I can't keep thinking about you. It's too painful.
And we wanted to move on in a way that we still beat up Peter Parker. Peter Parker has to be beat up all the time, put to the test. Job, love, life. It's like real life.
It's never easy to do the right thing, so that's why I like the Spider-Man movie that we're making now, because it's about choices, and it shows, not like a message movie, but it shows how we can all make these choices. How will he weigh his personal needs against his sense of responsibility?
That's the problem. He doesn't know what to think.
Gonna make you mad not to know who you are. Your soul disappears. Nothing as bad as uncertainty. Maybe you're not supposed to be Spider-Man climbing those walls.
And Sam literally took this frame from the books, one of the biggest sagas in the Marvel Universe, and we felt that it's not easy to do in 2 hours, but we felt we really needed to go there.
The biggest decision was who was his adversary going to be. And we had worked on Doc Ock. We had worked on him as a character visually for the first movie. We talked about having he and the Green Goblin together.
But there was so much story to tell with the origin of Spider-Man, the origin of the Green Goblin. We really didn't think we would do the movie justice by having a third origin in there. Because he was a fan favorite, and we realized the great possibilities cinematically with Doc Ock, which are really obvious when you read the Spider-Man comic books. He does all these fantastic things with these mechanical arms. we realized we wanted to have him.
And there was the classic approach, which is Doc Ock, who is a revered scientist, developed this incredible thing, and what do we do with him? And that's on one hand. On the other hand, we had another storyline that, for me, thankfully, didn't go anywhere. And it was about Doc Ock, a younger Doc Ock, who is actually infatuated with Mary Jane and creates a love triangle. Some of us don't like love triangles, not like that, not with our main villain, and we went through a process, and I think we chose well. He is the ultimate enemy for Spider-Man, and that's why it's so interesting, because there is nothing Spider-Man can do that he cannot counteract.
It's wonderful to have a villain in the second picture where can see his face, see their face emoting, expressing whatever they're feeling. Alfred's a great actor, and we really needed somebody with that strong sense of reality and somebody with a sense of humor, which Alfred has. This character, Doc Ock, the way that Alfred is creating him, he's really a human being, a misunderstood man who becomes a beast.
I had a meeting with Sam, which was very general. We just chit-chatted about stuff. And it was all, I just thought it was like a meet and greet. I didn't really kind of give it much thought, because I didn't think for a second that I was really a serious contender for the part, because I'd never done anything like this before. I didn't have any sort of track record in this kind of movie. I mean, if you look at my resume of films, you wouldn't be blamed for walking away thinking, well, he's kind of like, he does little independent arty movies, you know, every now and again he does a little studio thing here and there, but I'd never played a part this big in such a big movie.
Ladies and gentlemen, fasten your seatbelts.
I think what I'm most gratified about is that for each character, there's an evolution. There's a furtherance of who they are and what their journey is, and there's suspense about where they're going.
In the first draft, actually, we had Harry put a prize on Spider-Man's head. We got rid of that because really it's more important for Harry and Peter to look at each other and Harry to say, if you knew who he was, would you tell me?
Don't act like you're my friend. You stole MJ from me. You stole my father's love. And then you let him die because he didn't turn in the freak. Isn't that right? Huh? Isn't that right? Huh, brother?
I think that's the secret of Spider-Man. The first one and the second one, they really took time to develop all the characters and give Peter Parker's world away from Spider-Man a life of its own. And you know, it's a touching story, and I think that's why Spider-Man's the best comic book movie around.
You have a superhero who is almost reluctant about it, and is actually having to debate with himself whether it's worth giving up a regular life to take on the responsibility of being a hero, which is really quite an interesting idea, you know, and an interesting dilemma, which I'm sure we would all be interested in finding out, asking ourselves, you know, well, if I had all these superpowers and I could save the world, would I give everything up to do that? You know, and it's an interesting question to ask yourself.
Good stories show us the way. They show what is possible, and that's why I like this story so much, because this character is conflicted. He wants to be happy, but he wants to do the right thing, and it shows how you can take this journey as you mature and maybe have a little bit of both.
I believe there's a hero in all of us that keeps us honest, gives us strength, makes us noble.
It's good to have you back, Spider-Man.
We really never stopped. We released the first movie and went right into the development and production of the second one, so it wasn't like, I actually had a week off. I don't think Sam had a day off, so, you know, it was a kind of continuum. So we're a little shop, not quite in the same way, say, Peter Jackson and Lord of the Rings. It's not as if we were making the movies simultaneously, which would, in a sense, be a luxury. It would be nice to have known at the outset what the first 3 movies were going to be and have that overview. You know, in some ways that would have been a benefit that we didn't have. But in other ways, there's the fun of doing it, seeing what you've learned, taking that and, you know, moving forward.
I need New York speed. This is LA speed.
Okay. A little faster moving, everyone.
The other thing that serves us is, in most areas, we've all worked together before.
The more people I find that I can work with, that I feel comfortable with, that deliver great artistic results, I try and never let them go. Try and always make my movies with them. And I'm finding a lot on this picture.
There's so many people involved in Spider-Man 2. It's so, I mean, Spider-Man 1 as well, but it's just incredible, like, to think about every little moment is drawn, you know? It's pretty incredible.
They kind of, in the beginning, the temptation, and you should do it, is to throw everything in the kitchen sink in there in regards to the different looks and what you want. And then it's just a reeling back process, and what do we need them to do?
I'm an illustrator for this show, one of 3 or 4, and our job is to illustrate certain images that they want to occur in the course of the movie. You know, they're usually a dramatic image.
It's necessary on this complex of a movie in terms of shooting because, you know, you've got CG elements mixed in with stunts, so you have to be pretty precise about what you shoot. You know, you can't just go like, oh, we think this is a good plan, so we're gonna go ahead and do it.
I'd like to think that we're taking it just a little bit further than in the comic books, because obviously they're dealing with narration of story and flow of story, and we're just dealing with an isolated scene. So we get a little more time to really, you know, and embellish on the look of it. What we do is work with the production designer and art directors to visualize what they want to see, what they want to show to the director. And we basically go and meet with them, and they let us know roughly what they want to see, and we illustrate it so they can print it out and show the director, see if that's the direction he wants to go in.
It's great to have so many years of fantastic material to base the movies on, and so many great pictures and story ideas. But finally, when it comes to production design, Neil really has to start from scratch and determine what is the world that our movie takes place in.
It's my 4th movie with Sam, and there's a trust level there that you cannot, you can't gain it any other way than spending a lot of time working with someone. He is very giving in that he gives you a clue as to what he wants, and then you run.
He really finally determines the look and was right there on top of every decision. And it's a very consistent New York that he's created. It's not an absolutely real New York, nor is it some New York of fantasy.
What was great about having something as loose as it was at the beginning is that you can offer up as many ideas as you want and throw things into the pot, and some things were useful, some things weren't, but it's a much more, certainly a much more energetic process when you have a looser framework when you're starting, because you can add and subtract things and inspire new ideas. There are over 100 sets and locations, and some are just a street corner in New York, and some are, you know, entire streets. There were probably 10 major sets, enormous big sets, but lots of little tiny ones, bits and pieces.
The art department their job basically is to manifest the physical
reality of what a movie is and where they're going to shoot it, whether it's a location or a set on stage. And so most of it occurs in Spider-Man either in New York or on a stage set here in Los Angeles. And for any stage sets, we start off with reading the script and seeing what the requirements are. And our production designer will do a meeting with Sam and have a rough sketch or an idea. And then from that rough sketch or an idea, we build upon that by developing other sketches and renderings. And then we do paper models.
In front of me are a number of the models of the sets I've been working on. The model tells us a number of things. The first thing it does is it helps the designer see the space, see the detail level, the draftings that we do to make the model become the draftings that we're going to give the construction shop to actually build the final set. One of the things we always try to make for the model is we try to make the walls wild, which is our term for a piece that can come away, which will match the walls that will be wild when we build the final set, so that the director can see exactly what his framing will be. We know that we've built enough set. We know that the composition is just what he wants for the final frame.
Also, we might do a 3D model to pre-visualize what that set will be.
We're doing most of the filming here in Los Angeles, so we have to bring New York back to the stage. We're after a stylization of New York, more of a comic book version. So we photograph backings or views of New York. Once we design the skyline, we're able to test the view by building the set actually in the computer. We build a computer-generated version of our interior, and we place this image outside the window and look around and see that everything looks good. See, in the old days, this would have been just Xeroxes on cardboard in front of a paper model. And the paper models are still very, very useful for us. But for the specific views, there's such an investment in these backings. It's good to get them right. And then ultimately, this will be printed on a large piece of backlit vinyl. Here we have, a couple of 100 feet of image, 34 feet high.
And we will then move into architectural draftings of the set.
A lot of times we'll do schematic drawings that are given to the model makers to build models from. And then they'll come back and we'll kind of develop it back and forth. These kind of drawings are just for the skin. The furniture and the paper and that stuff is done by set dressing.
We knew that certain sets from the first Spidey would return, like Aunt May's house and Norman's den, which would then become Harry's den. So we knew that we were going to take that set and rework it a little bit and, make it become part of the next movie. So those sets fit a category, things we knew we were reusing and working. And then there were, certain sequences that Sam felt mildly sure about. For instance, the end sequence, he had said, give it some thought. Where do you think the final battle should be? We know we'll have one. So I suggested up here, and that seemed like a good idea. Everyone was very excited about it.
The whole movie was on hiatus for about 8 weeks while that set was being built. And we all came back after 8 weeks, and the first day I was back, I came back the day before we started work on the set, and I went to have a look at it, and I was stunned. I mean, it's just beautiful, beautiful, beautiful set.
The pier was to be a more exploded version of the lab, and a more his life has fallen apart, it's become evil, and the scale of it, though, is several times bigger.
It's about 60 feet by 120 feet by about 40 feet tall here on stage 30. We opened up the pit at the east end so that as you look down towards that end of the pit, the floor has broken away and you can see into the water. It's probably ended up being about 15 weeks of building. When we started prepping and building each individual column and bracket, and we put up the big high trusses first, and then sort of built down to the floor and then into the pit, where we had to do a rock formation to hide the pit walls, so that it appears as though the pier has not only gotten crushed on the side, but has fallen down. So a lot of the walls and trusses were put in at funny angles so that it all looks like it's crushed and damaged. It's not only been built here in full scale, but we're building a miniature interior and exterior for plate shots, placing it, on the edge of the river, and to see it collapse and go into the river at the end of the sequence.
You're divvying up all the projects to as many people as you can in order to make the project get finished, but then you also want everyone to contribute and keep all their ideas going the same route. So we jump around a lot. We spend a lot of time with a lot of people and, guide it toward the end. And what's interesting is that it's not always exactly what you envisioned. Usually it's better. Usually it's more interesting because people bring things to the table.
Cool Spidey outfit. Thanks. Where'd you get it?
I made it.
The Spider-Man that Jim Atchison created for this movie is very similar to the one he created in the first movie. At least it will seem that way to the audience.
This second costume, while it has details that are different, and the colors are slightly different, I mean, you need to be a real enthusiast to spot the differences. It's a great opportunity to have a go at something again. I mean, this costume was probably the most difficult thing I've ever... It should look very simple and slightly naive. Here we were trying to do something which was about really an acrobat who had this unbelievable kinetic, spiraling ability. So it had to be a very flexible thing. We went through a huge, long, circular trip in terms of developing the costume of Spider-Man. And over a 6-month period, we came back to believing that we had to sort of respect the icon. And in fact, the closer and more truthful we were to the image of Spidey, as long as it moved properly and it didn't wrinkle too much, and the stuntmen were able to do their somersaults, and the CGI people could recreate it, then that was the way to go. This time we're making 35 suits, and we've developed a new way of making them with a sublimation printing process, which isn't quite as good as the silkscreen process, but we save a bit of money and we save a lot of time. The first thing to do is always employ people that are cleverer than you. You're only as good as your own team. So I have a great assistant called Paul Spadone, who worked with me on the last film.
We've been working for the past 7 months, 8 months now, sort of revisiting Spider-Man's costume from the first film and updating it and enhancing it, and doing a lot of work with the color of the suit and the printing techniques. The pieces that you're seeing here, we have a whole rack of them, represent a lot of the trial and error of our development and research early on. Each one of these pieces is a silkscreen piece of the suit, and each section of the suit is hand silkscreened in New York by a team of artists there, and each area of the suit requires about 6 screens. A lot of what we did this time around was try and bring a greater depth to the color and a richness to the color. And I think that you'll see that the reds this time around have a real boldness as well as the blues.
There's a spider that we redesigned, that Jim redesigned on the back, that now has a more elegant, flowing lines that work in more harmony with the back of Spider-Man. If we went with a wider format, he's even going to get smaller in frame. I mean, the way to photograph him now is like this. And there's going to be a lot of room on the sides of the frame, even for a medium close shot. Before, you could make his image much bigger. I mean, the problem is exacerbated if we went widescreen. Right. We're not decided on that. That's the potential problem. The next problem is the graphic difference that we're now talking about, making, in this case, I remember it blended in exactly. It was easier when a shot had to break it. You had to cut off the legs. Occasionally that happens. To accept. But in this case, because it makes such a dramatic statement against the wider webbing, it's going to be slightly more offensive to break the graphic a little bit, because we're saying it stands out, and then we're saying, but we're cropping it. So that's the second factor.
Do you want to try something this size, that design?
Well, we're just bringing a smaller one now.
Just
we're getting a smaller one slightly.
Well, we'll see. Let's see if 80 works.
Not bad.
75. You getting this, Grant?
Yes, I am.
Is this enough?
75 looks pretty
I
cool.
see the whole, zoom back each time and see what the whole.
Try 80. Not bad.
show me his
Sam, does
face?
that help your problem at all?
Show me his face with it.
Same problem. That feels big enough
Well,
to me.
I don't mind it a little bit smaller than the 100%. I will say that.
That's 80. That's not bad.
80.
This is the new spider that we have on the front, which is a great new design. And on the back, both of them are in applied latex.
This is one of the first designs that came to us here at the end of the R&D period. And from Jim's design, we produced molds which allowed us to produce a variety of urethane spiders in varying thicknesses. The favorite thickness turns out to be this scale, which is also the same scale as the surrounding webbing. The benefit of this is now that the spider is more integrated into the costume. Instead of it being a flat printed logo on the back of the costume, it's now raised, and it's going to tie in a little bit better to the surrounding web. One step we've gone even better beyond this is, and again, it only exists in a mold stage right now, was to have a custom metal mold made. And we've taken the spider emblem, but we've added the bevel surface all the way around the edge. So in cross-section, instead of it just being a rectangular raised piece, it's now got a bevel. It basically matches the same bevel, the same angles that's on the spider web, so it's all very congruent now.
This is the web separate from the suit. And each piece of the suit comes to us, or like this, and then it is glued by hand onto the fabric, laid flat, after which it is all sewn up and put together as a complete suit.
The last time around, one of the big problems, challenges to figure out was what type of material to make this raised webbing out of. It had to stretch with the spandex, and yet it had to have enough structure that it looked like steely, hardened, tough material. So after some testings with urethanes and silicones and some other materials, we landed on foam latex, which had the right kind of properties to give Jim what he was looking for. This is shows you what the a basic piece of webbing looks like when it comes out of the mold. This is the Spider-Man 1 technology. The improvements we've made this time around are that we have, by using a backing on the mold with a special gasket material, excuse me, and this is a negative mold, we're able to produce pieces that have a lot of this flashing gone. For instance, this piece here, you can see, has much less flashing on it, and that eliminates some of the trimming work.
We have made subtle changes in terms of the elasticity of the muscle suit and the movement of the false jaw inside the hood of the costume.
The improvements that we made, they're seemingly slight, but they're all more about performance, flexibility of the suit rather than the appearance. The biggest difference is that we've separated all of the muscles into separate units as opposed to the muscle suit from the first movie, which had a lot of overlap of muscle material, which is just foam rubber, which bridged all of those muscle groups. Now, again, even though this is very flexible and supple, the improvement of doing it this way is that it allows more of this finely knitted material in between to give it more stretch. So conceivably, well, definitely, there's going to be more movement as the performer is inside the suit. It also allows the suit to fit down a little snugger down in between the valleys, and hopefully it will give you a little more definition to the musculature.
Over here we have the various incarnations of helmets. The idea was to come up, as far as the understructure of the helmet goes, we wanted to come up with a new way, a better way to lock the eye frames into the helmet, and we also wanted to add a little bit of flexibility to the jaw. So all of these were various types that were tried, prototypes put together. Jim chose a couple from that, and we moved forward off of his selection.
Underneath this, if it was not the reveal mask, would go the undershell mask. And the undershell mask goes on before the head gets pulled over to give a little structure and design to it. And changes, these were just made for a little more talking this time. There were some changes to the eyes and how the frames go in, convenience-wise and look-wise. The lenses, obviously they don't want to have the lenses on at all times. You want to make it quick and convenient to put the lenses in and out. So the lens is it's a casted urethane and a few little airbrushing things to it. And what it does is it'll go in to the suit, magnetically lock in. And obviously between that would be the fabric.
Another change that was made to the suit this time around was the webbing on the glove, especially on the palm, which was not there on the first Spider-Man. It's drawn in a lot of different ways in the comics. Sometimes it's just a series of straight lines running across the hand, other times it's more of a grid, but what we chose to go with is this pattern, which comes down here and follows sort of the general natural shape of the hand.
By the time we get the fabric in its printed form, to the time it's got all its bits inside and outside, it's 3 weeks. It's longer than that. It's 3 to 4 weeks, a suit.
There's an entire shop that sews the suits and glues all of the webbing down. There's another shop with its team of craftsmen fabricating the webs, painting the webs, fabricating the eye lenses, painting the eye lenses. And we also have another shop in New York who's done all the silkscreen printing. So it's a huge enterprise with a lot of people spending a lot of time and putting their talents towards it.
I think I deserve a little something for this.
Give you $50.
I could get more than that on eBay.
It's about finding the essence and supporting the characters. And I've done a lot of what I'd call the look at me school of design, where you're dressing people in big flashy outfits. This is one flashy outfit that somehow had to kind of work.
Looks uncomfortable. It gets kind of itchy. It rides up in the crotch a little bit, too.
A lot of times you don't have an idea for something, but you've got a deadline. And that fear is a great thing to work on you, on me specifically. I mean, I'm driven by it. Will I fail? Will I get it together in time? It's a great motivator to do some of your best work.
I think one of the really striking things about Sam, and maybe is that he's the audience. he watches the movie and makes the movie for the audience and identifies with the characters and is really thinking about, you know, the rhythms of the movie and how the movie's going to play for himself as an audience.
Got it now. Good. That was good. All right, that's a print.
Spider-Man and Sam Raimi are the same thing to me. You know, it comes from him. It's his vision.
Kids come to this picture, and Spider-Man is their hero. And I'm not talking about because of the first movie. I just mean anyone you put in a superhero outfit and you play the heroic horns on the soundtrack, they are going to look up to as the hero. You just get that unearned. It's not fair, but it really is true. So you have an obligation to bring your character to the level that's worth their admiration. You get it without having paid for it. So the job of making the movie in some way is paying for it.
Sam, I need you to take a look at this and put your masterful eye to the choice of locations that we have.
All right, so let's take a look. Let's take a look with the audience. Let them help make Spider-Man. This is rehearsal of the end of the walk, the halt in front of the alley. Are you ready, mister? Great. Now this time, ready, and action. Okay, ready, and action.
And now for the main event. Give me the blue light, Rosie.
It's a very different, very unique way of filming. It's not like anything most of us get to do, really. You know, it's much more to do with the technology. So you can't fight that. You can't sort of start. You can't stand in the middle of all this technology and say, I'm a bit worried about, why am I here? You can't really, I mean, you got to be serious about it, but you can't. You have to balance the elements of the job. It's a very particular way of working. It's a very interesting. I find it, absolutely fascinating.
3, 2, 1, strike!
Oh, that was bitchin'. Let's do another one. Just because you can.
On a roll. Let's go.
As the director of a picture, the crew is expecting you to know what you're doing and trusting in you to know what you're doing, to lead them. Everyone is really doing the work. It's just that the finished product is more in the director's hands than the other artistic contributors. And there are so many artistic contributors, from the actors to the grips to the electricians to the makeup departments to the hair departments to the wardrobe, everybody. So the fact that the movie did well made me feel great in the sense that I thought that all the people that worked on the picture for so long and hard must have thought that I had led them well, because the movie turned out okay.
I think that crew was the hardest working crew I've ever seen. And it was because Sam treated them well and treated them with respect, and I think they would have walked across hot coals for him had he requested it.
We were scouting, prepping, producing, and shooting all at the same time. The word balance is probably not the way to describe this process. We were on a timetable. Actually, the movie was supposed to be out in May.
I think the sense of community and one vision obviously has to come from the director. It really comes from Sam, who has a very clear vision and is a very good communicator of that vision.
He is willing them to life, concentrating, and now this one trembles and the other, and they start to rise up, up, up to the top. And now one or two of you notice the monitor, images of yourselves, and now he opens his eyes and steps down.
My smart arms are controlled by my brain through a neural link.
He's very, very concerned with telling the right story and telling the story well. And so there's in both Spider-Man 1 and 2, I think there's a great balance between the huge kind of money shots and those moments of tenderness or moments of great intimacy.
Do you love me or not?
He's not going for a conventional, love story. Or you have to have those moments that everybody clings on to, but then he'll completely take you off guard in the next moment.
Any of the fans who thought that Sam Raimi was a sellout has turned his back on Evil Dead and all the movies that he's excelled at and is known for will finally have to shut their mouths, because it's like full-on Sam Raimi.
He's a very well-rounded director. He delivers very exciting visual images, but he cares a lot about the actors, and I've had a blast with him.
Peter. He says to me, look, you're my partner in telling this story. You're my partner in building your character of Peter Parker, but I also trust you in telling the story of this movie with me. So if you have anything to say, any suggestions, I feel completely free to just bring up anything I want.
Yeah. No, I want you to do it the way I want you to do it. And you're going to do it the way I want you to do it. When I say jump, you say what color?
Well, Sam, you're telling me that as if that's something I don't know, as if something's changed. I've gone through your abuse from the first picture, and here we are in the second picture. Once again, you're the puppet master, I'm the puppet. You're pulling the strings. Okay, Godfather.
I can see it my way.
I hear them sort of teasing each other a little bit and smiling and giggling a bit between them. They've obviously reached a very deep understanding of how to work together and a deep respect.
I'll tell you something else. The performance isn't good enough. I want some real quality acting in this picture. I want something like Bruce Campbell would give me.
Oh, shoelace.
You might want to... For me, the whole thing is very amusing, and it's been fun to watch, because why not have a guy who made, Evil Dead for $350,000 do Spider-Man? Because that's the guy you want, not the guy who's used to having everything all the time. Give it to someone who's used to doing a bunch with nothing. Now you give him something, and you can... I think it was a good choice. It was a good match of material, because Sam's always been a comic book guy.
Action. All right. Run a picture of a rancid chicken, food poisoning scare, Sweep City.
Some food got poisoned?
I'm a little nauseous, yeah.
The first movie Sam and I did together, I think we very quickly felt very comfortable together, and it gets more and more fun, and it's like going to a reunion every time I get to work with him again.
It gives me a great sense of stability, and I know that certain scenes will work because I've got these particular actors in it.
When we got back into the Daily Bugle, it felt like going home again, because this guy brings in an element of this movie that everybody fell in love with in movie one, and everybody wanted more.
Miss Brandt, give me a violin.
I think it's all there in the comic book, really. I mean, obviously you can't hear it, but the bluster is all there. The look obviously is there, the hair, the mustache, and all that.
I was afraid some people might think, oh, it's going to be too broad. I had heard that when I was shooting it. But I always found him funny. He's just a great actor. Seems to always have the right stuff for the right scenes, no matter what parts he's playing.
He means a lot to me because I always wanted to play J. Jonah Jameson. I wish they had made the movie 30 years ago so I could have. But I always felt he's my favorite character. I love J. Jonah Jameson. And I got to tell you that he plays the role, I hate to say it, better than I could have done it. I mean, he is wonderful. He has captured Jameson perfectly.
It was a throwback almost to those, the 40s, the 50s, that kind of, fast-talking newsroom, chatter. And I spent a couple days at the New York Post and obviously a much more contemporary setting, But that vibe of that sort of, hectic, especially as the deadline nears, as you get later in the day, the activity level gets really amped up, and that style just sort of seemed to lend itself.
We got 6 minutes to deadline, Jonah. We need page 1.
The dean of the university's furious.
Why?
Your article said that he wasn't even fit to teach kindergarten.
Sam is, to a large degree, an actor himself, though he doesn't really act, but he acts in his mind. In other words, he sees, I think he sees the characters that way, it seems to me. So then when he gets to set, he's got an idea of the rhythm and the pace, and he just plugs the actors in who can do that for him. So when he arrives on set, we just get sort of plugged in, and it works quite nicely.
The advantage of working with people that you know is that you know what their abilities or disabilities are, and you know how to work with them. The bad news is that, now that Sam's got the guys sometimes that he wants, he can bring them in. He also feels that he can browbeat them now too.
Bruce said, Sam's great, except he's got this strange thing for verbal and physical abuse, and he beat Bruce with a stick.
No, Bill Sam. Me.
Sam doesn't hit me or verbally abuse me quite as much as he did before, because there's too many people standing around now. If your crew is only 6 people, you can do whatever you want to the lead actor. No one's going to tell.
Anytime that Sam can throw something at me, he will.
Filming is not a democracy. It's a benign dictatorship. And the boss is on the floor. The boss is the director, and the director sets the tone.
Now you're gonna do it like I tell you to do it, or you get off the set. Also, you mess this up again and you're off the set. That is the weirdest slice removal I've ever seen.
I know, it's weird.
Now, what on earth are you doing up there?
Okay, so, Sam, I won't be spoken to in that manner.
You talking back to me? If I hear the word sorry again, you will learn the meaning of the word sorry. Look down, readjust the pizza for eating, raise it. That's it. All right, and no mugging.
Gotcha.
All right, here we go.
His attitude and his professionalism carries everybody through the whle shoot.
Grant is going to make sure everyone has a piece of cake, and the amount of time that it takes to eat those slices, he will duly deduct from your paycheck.
I think, maybe over the years he's really matured, and over the course of his career, we've seen him go from this kind of the horror genre, and then can make a movie like Simple Plan, can make a movie like Spider-Man.
Sam explained it pretty good making the first one. We were shooting the ring sequence, and he turned at one point and he goes, we're doing the same gags, but we just have a lot more money. It's nice that he can finally have the support. So if he goes, I got this crazy shot that I want to do, now he's got all the trained professionals in Southern California to go, okay, how can we make this happen? It's nice that the guy with the big ideas finally gets the toys.
In order to make Spider-Man fly through the city with the kind of flexibility that you would expect from somebody who's capable of leaping from 50 stories up and swinging through the street below, we had to have flexibility with the movement of the camera. And one of the things that Sam is very conscientious about is trying to make camera moves that don't seem implausible. Yeah.
So what you're saying is we do one
for the first part,
right, and then we'll do one that's
Earl Wiggins' Spider-Cam was used on Spider-Man 1 only for one shot. That's the last shot of the picture. But it was so effective in creating this dizzying, beautiful background plate that we've used Earl Wiggins' rig in Chicago on a number of days of photography there for a train chase sequence.
We had selected Chicago because we needed the proximity of the buildings to the tracks of the subway trains. And we could have used New York, but there was nothing close for us to shoot our plates. And we went to Chicago in November, and we shot with 17 cameras for 2 days shooting background plates.
First movie, we made the conceit that our cameraman traveled with Spider-Man, and he had inaccuracies in his operation, and he had to constrain himself to physical laws. As Spider-Man swinging through the bottom of his arc, the cameraman went through the bottom of his arc with him. The cameraman couldn't suddenly pop up 20 feet above him. So trying to stay within the definition of a quote, super camera, and keep it so that the camera doesn't draw attention to itself is one of the huge challenges of making this character believable. It's one of the few ways that you can position a camera in such a large space, and in fact, such a precarious situation. There's no camera rigs that are out there that allow you to control the camera as completely, and it allows us to get 300 to 500 feet above the ground quite easily, and it allows us to control the camera through that movement.
We also used it in New York to achieve a lot of the plates for Doc Ock and Spider-Man to move through. We would take the camera and soar it through the city blocks and blocks, dropping some 50 stories at a time, to really give the audience the feeling that they were soaring with Spider-Man.
We knew that in the first one, what we were missing to a certain degree was a little bit of the vertigo that it is to be Spider-Man, because his world is not 5 stories up, it's not 2 stories up, it's 75 stories up.
What we needed to do is we had to find a location where the rooftop was going to be in the middle of other buildings. And this is a rooftop I've actually used before for other movies. It's a process. It's dealing with building engineers to get engineering surveys to find out what our limits are per square foot with bodies or just equipment. And working with the mayor's film office, getting our necessary permits. So it's very time consuming, and in the film industry, as much as we try to plan ahead, sometimes with changes it makes it impossible.
It's just another aspect to the puzzle that is the filmmaking process. That makes it a little bit harder, but believe me, we couldn't have been happier than to go up on those rooftops, because that is Spider-Man's world.
The thing that's so nice about the Spider-Cam is that we can put our people on the street, we can put people in the buildings, and we have all of the pigeons and the live action components that make the city alive.
We had some of the longest wire shots that this company Spider-Cam has ever done. We've done one in New York, which was 2,400 feet, and we did one in Los Angeles, which was 3,200 feet. So that was the longest span they've ever filmed with.
In this case, we're actually trying to get the footage on location as opposed to doing it 100% CG like we did in the last movie. So it's a cheaper way to do the shot this way than it would be to do the whole city in computer-generated buildings and such.
We take a model of the city, meaning a computer-generated model, generally something that's shot from satellites, gives us a sense of where these buildings are, accurate to 3 or 4 feet. Then we take in that computer model, we place a camera, and we make a computer-based move through that virtual city.
This is the pre-visualization that we loaded into motion control. The move here is done in Maya. And it would be really hard to follow a Spider-Man out there that doesn't exist. So we do it here first to get all the pans and tilts correct, and then load it into motion control, and off it goes.
The idea is to show ultimately what's going to appear in the final movie. And when we bring the program out here and put it into the SpiderCam, it duplicates exactly the moves that we made in that model. And because the model was accurate, we have an accurate sense of what we're going to capture here. Very nice, very nice. We're shooting these shots at frame rates as slow as 6 frames a second, meaning the camera is running slower than it normally would. So when you play it back on screen, it appears much faster. The idea is to make the flying sequences poetic enough and evocative enough that you start to get a sense of what it's like to do that.
Seemingly on a daily basis, we do, gags that on other pictures I'd have a couple of weeks to figure out. And each day we're doing one of those kind of stunts.
It can be pretty physical. I mean, it's like pretty much divided up in half and half. Like half of the movie, I'm doing scenes, and half of the movie is all action stuff. And it can be difficult. It can be fun. It's always fun when you go in to do something and you're not sure if you can pull it off or not, and you do it and you pull it off, and it's like something they can use in the movie.
I think people might be more familiar with, traditional flying, where it's like, you're using a wire to, levitate somebody and just have them flying through empty space. And in more recent times, there's like the Hong Kong, wire fighting, which is, you see with Jackie Chan and, Jet Li and those guys who have a very specific style.
My style is like more like wire and kung fu and wushu, and compressing the movie style, like more like imagine, more design, like some cool move. But it's very carefully on what situation you have to put the right timing, right action on Spider-Man. Otherwise, if he do some like Chinese kung fu, you will feel, oh, what?
A few years ago, we started to take those kinds of techniques and use them for more traditional kind of Western stunts. The Hong Kong, wire work around the world is mostly hand pulls. So you go from the performer, you pan down the wire, you're going to find 4 guys holding the end of a rope. And we do that a lot because it's fast and efficient, but we also attach it to mechanical devices that are very much part of the Hollywood lore.
The choreography that Dion came with, and then our rigging background and our ability to take a human body and wing it around in a space really started coming together.
Action! Go! Go! Cut! Cut!
We tried to develop a style that was a Spider-Man-like style, didn't want it to be kung fu, didn't want it to be gymnastics. It really had to have Spider-Man's signature on it.
His incredible strength and flexibility gave us a lot of freedom, and challenge. I mean, it's like he can do anything, and we just have to figure out how to make, the human being who's performing, the superhero, pull it off. And Chris Daniels did a great job. often in a meeting, I'll sit there and go, you know, I don't know how to do this. I see this in my head, and I don't know how to do it because we've never done it, but you know, it's like, this is a situation, this is a perfect time to experiment and figure out how to make this person move in this particular way, because we are looking for things that we've never seen before.
Roll video.
Go. 3, 2, 1, go. Okay, got it now.
Toby did a tremendous amount of his own stunts in this picture, as much as I would allow him to do. He wanted to do everything.
Before we really knew exactly what he had to do, we had him doing all kinds of things. Had him in what's called a twisty belt, where he flips this way and you can turn that way, and you just kind of are all over the place.
Okay. On a roll, back to 1. Mike?
You can put it out slower, and it doesn't have to be faster. Okay. It can be actually slower.
All right. He came in and he worked with the wire team and the stunt guys, you know, every other day for hours. So for somebody with a back problem, he really stepped up.
Ready, action. Yeah.
I've done a lot of stunts. Yeah, mostly any stunt that I can do, I do. And Rosemary Harris did a lot of stunts too. Her and I are the stunt queens.
Thank you.
It was Alvin Sargent who said, before we ever put pen to paper of what the Spider-Man movie was going to be, just came in one day and said, Spider-Man should save Aunt May and swing with Aunt May. And actually, we called Rosemary right before we were going to start and send her the script, and we said, now you get to fly with Spider-Man. She was so excited.
I played Peter Pan in an outdoor production, so I have flown before. But then the big flying people were the Kirby Flying Ballet. It was nothing like this, and not nearly so sophisticated.
You know, Sam's really nervous, and, you know, I have the producers look at me and it's like, you know, remember, she's 78 years old, and we're like, yeah, I know, but she loves this stuff. And we have yet to, you know, she has excelled at everything we've had her do.
My very sweet stunt double, and I feel very guilty now because I did her out of her grandchildren, saying, look, there's Granny, you know. But I saw her do it, and I said to Laura and to Sam, why not me? And they said, oh, well, we wouldn't want you to do it. I said, oh, please. So I begged them to, and they relented, and it was lovely. I loved it.
Background, 3, 2, 1, go!
Oh, thank you.
She really is a trooper. I've never seen an actress with as much gusto and gumption as Rosemary Harris. She gets on that wire and you take her on a wild ride, and the first thing she says is, let's do it again.
That was wonderful. Thank you.
Her smile was just radiant. You know, she was loving it. It was absolutely just, it was worth, you know, it's just an added pleasure that you don't normally get, you know, when you see somebody that's just that into it and finding the fun in it.
Now, I would have done it myself, but I didn't want to intimidate you. Yeah, I wanted you to feel like you had really accomplished something that few people would have done, see? So that's the only reason I didn't go up there myself.
If June could do it, I could do it.
Yeah. I'm telling the DVD people.
Oh, I see.
Gotta keep my reputation.
Oh, that's right.
Thank you, it's great.
3, 2, 1, go!
Fred, do you think it's going to be any problem to start underwater
No.
and on actually launch up? Really, you're not frightened to do that?
No, no problem. As long as I can hear action. As long as we're not like
Yeah.
I'm cagging my pants. My feelings are very plain on this, and I have no problem with this at all. I've never heard a stuntman say, "I could do that scene," or "I could do that line." I've never heard a stuntman say that, and I always think every stunt that I do is putting a stuntman out of work, and they pay me the compliment of not doing that to me. So I try as much as I can not to do that to them.
Keep it away from the ball and just go boom, boom, boom. Like that. Excellent. Yeah, it's really, they had to make some, maybe a little bit of fine tuning, that was it. Just like we got right.
All right. It's my whole new career for me as a stuntman.
That's it.
I'm not very good at stunts. You know, my idea of a stunt is getting out of bed in the morning, you know, doing up my shirt. But sometimes you have to do certain things because of, you know, they want the camera close and stuff.
He's mine!
Well, you're going to have to get through us.
Oh, very well.
Is my hair on fire?
He said to me the other day, "This will teach you, Dan. Don't send an actor in to do a stuntman's job." But Alfred's done a great job. But he makes no bones about it. He doesn't do stunts. And every now and then we trick him into one. We'll tell him, it's like, "It's not really a stunt, Alfred."
3, 2, 1, go!
Anything I can get away with, I'll leave it to in the hands of the stunt guys, you know, because that's dangerous stuff. You know, it's that's why they have stuntmen, you know, because you know, otherwise we'd all be, you know, throwing ourselves off tall buildings.
If the stunt does not go well, we'll be deprived of this sound. Like that.
Okay, picture will be up. Picture's up. Clear the north wall.
He means it.
Not fully, no.
Yeah. Okay, and false to lights, action. 3, 2, 1, go! God?
The cut.
Eric?
Yes, sir.
Not fully.
Fire in the hall.
Fire in the hall, propane.
In times gone by, we were called special effects men. But since the digital age has come about, they've broken it down to visual effects and special effects, which is really digital work, which is done in the lab, and the mechanical special effects, which is done live on the set. You need live elements so that the actor can work with things. And the actor just can't work against a blue screen or a green screen all the time. He won't get the feel for it. We have to match all the elements. Anytime somebody's falling off a building, we create that wind. Everything you see in the air, we will put in the air. See, this scene required, Sam wanted a lot of pollen in the air, but the problem was that because we came here, it wasn't quite spring yet, we had to look for this stuff. And what we found, the best thing for pollen is actually belly button lint. And we've been collecting this belly button lint now for about 4 weeks. We always thought that New York was just, you know, like you hear a lot of things about New York. What we found is that New York is actually the belly button lint capital of the world. This is about 3 weeks of belly button lint from New York. We hope we have enough for the shot. Anything that generally will move, we are responsible for. The construction department will build the set, but then it is our responsibility to make that set move.
Come on. Ready, and action. He picks up Spidey, and he's aware of it. Wait, stop, throw, and hit!
I kind of have a rule of thumb where if it's shot within 15 feet of a 15-foot range, it's pretty much going to be live. Anything past that is pretty much going to be digital.
Go! God.
The fire on this one was almost 3 times as big as the first one. We shot the first one in New York City, and we were pretty limited on what we can do there. Although the fire department was a big help, we did the second one on the back lot at Universal. So it was pretty much we built the set to burn.
No one in this area other than stunts and effects. Okay.
There's air mortars inside to accentuate the blast with debris and a little bit of wind. And there's a little bit of sparks coming out with the doors for Sam. And it won't be too noisy. No ear protection inside, but out here we're all fine.
The burning building was a very special set of needs that we had to fulfill to accommodate the shooting crew and to accommodate John and to provide a set that was safe for everybody to work on. This is the before picture. This is the back lot before it has any of the work we're going to bring to it. No signage, no awnings, no detail of any kind. This is a part of that same block as we'll represent it in the movie with the building on fire. We're going to add all the awnings, the traffic lights, the clocks, the fire escapes, the gratings, the signage. These aspects of New York City will be added in digitally after we shoot our first footage.
All right, let's go.
D-Mark.
Okay, clearing, and background action, background, action.
The burning building was a completely different problem. We actually had a building on the back lot that we liked very much, and what we found was that the construction technique on the back lot was fiberglass and wood, and both of those things would have not held up to the intensity of the fire. We actually clad the entire existing building with a duplicate, a skin of the same building made in plaster and backed with drywall. We skinned all the existing surfaces with drywall. We installed metal awnings, metal grates on the windows, and replaced all the wood frame windows with metal duplicates of the windows. And then the special effects team came in and rigged their burning bars and burning units and protective shields so that the rest of the building wouldn't catch fire.
What we've got going on here is, this is what we call our fire pan. And what this does is this directs the flames out of the building. Without this pan being on there, the flames would come back into the building and up through the ceiling. And what you can see is this is just a movie set, so we have to protect the set itself. What we have inside of here, where this pipe is leading to, is what we call a fire bar. It's a piece of 3/4 inch pipe, and what we do is we slot the pipe with a saw, and the propane will enter through here and it'll come out and create that fire for us. And what we'll do is we'll set a level that the director likes, and then we'll pretty much maintain that level throughout the course of the night. What these are here, these are our main control valves, and what we'll do is we'll have a preset with the director. And when the director looks at the fire, he can determine what he likes, and then we will adjust the fire to change the height and the configuration of the fire so that all the windows don't look the same. So that it looks like it's hotter, it's maybe not burning as much in one room as in the other one, so it doesn't look like a theme park ride. The principal actors, they don't have a chance to come on the set up until the time we shoot it. And so when they come on the set, we pretty much want to give them a walk through the whole scenario and say, Toby, this is exactly what's going to happen. And then what we'll do is we'll bring up a little bit of fire, make them comfortable. What we're looking at here is what we call a propane mortar. We will fill this accumulator tank with propane, fill it up to, and then we'll charge it with about 125 pounds of air. And then on a cue, as Toby or Peter Parker comes through the door, we will blast this, and what that's going to look like is a little explosion has happened inside the room.
It's scary when you send an actor into a burning building. I mean, the first thought that crosses your mind is, I hope that CG version of him is pretty good. I'm joking, of course.
When you sign up for a movie like Spider-Man, you're essentially like signing up for the military, or it's like a jail sentence. I had just wrapped up Spider-Man 1 like only a couple months prior, and I didn't think I was going to be coming out until maybe a month before production. But they shot some background plates for the big train sequence in Chicago, and it was just a huge mountain of footage, you know, hours and hours of 35 millimeter in Vista and you know, all kinds of different formats. And he just really wanted to get a jump start on basically sort of assembling the scene, starting with the background plates and then incorporating, you know, previses and animatics and stuff that they had already done. Sam actually started planning the scenes even as we were finishing Spider-Man 1. He was gearing up. We hadn't had a script yet, but he knew of some certain set pieces that he wanted for the movie. So even at the point that I came on, there was already quite a few storyboards, hundreds of storyboards, and some of the major shots had already been sort of pre-vised out in, you know, rough computer or you know, like animatic form, you know, taking the storyboards and like making moves on the boards. So the first thing I did was I took the scans of all the storyboards and everything else and just basically started building the sequence together as if it was working with dailies. And by the end of the first couple of weeks I was on, I had like, you know, a 10-minute long sequence cut, which was like a full reel of the movie. That cut basically was used to try to figure out what we needed to do in terms of shooting. You know, it's crude, but you really get a feeling of how the scene is working and progressing. So you can do a lot of planning before, you know, like storyboards are for, kind of plan it out on paper before you actually commit to shooting things and, you know, and spending the money. And then, of course, then when you shoot it, a lot of things change, and you can't be too slavish to the animatics or storyboards because, you know, the actors come up with stuff on the set, or the stunt guys come up with different bits of business, or of course Sam, you know. But it's just, it's a good start for any scene. I've known Sam for years, and, you know, we share a lot of the same tastes in terms of a love of horror and a love of suspense and a love of, you know, making the audience jump and scream.
Hello, Harry.
And just, you know, just a desire to sort of put on a good show for the kids. Part of the fun process of working on a movie like Spider-Man 2, or even Spider-Man 1, that it crosses so many genres. That, you know, on one hand it's sort of a drama, and on the other hand it's a horror picture, and, you know, it's an action movie, and it's a comedy, and it's sort of every genre.
Anybody here take shop class?
Well, what was nice about the horror scene is I think that the studio went for it, especially in a movie like Spider-Man, for it to take such a kind of a dark, gruesome turn. And we were worried, of course, that it wouldn't get a PG-13, and, you know, there's no blood, but it's still pretty intense, you know. And it's cool to, you know, be getting the first guy to see those dailies, you know. You get the dailies, and there's a lot of cool zoom shots on screaming faces, and, you know, the old chainsaw coming up into frame, and, you know, those kind of classic trademark Sam Raimi shots. So, you know, it's cool that, you know, he's able to pull all that stuff together that he loves, and, you know, do it in a huge movie like this. You always have to be aware of what you need to tell the story. I think it's more important to that every shot in a sequence services the story and tells the story to its best way possible. And sometimes they have a maximum amount of impact. The shots need to be short, and I don't really see it as a stylistic thing as much as just sort of figuring out what's best for that given moment of a scene, what'll give the shot the most impact, or that part of the sequence. It's keeping the story moving and keeping everything super clear, crystal clear, within any given shot or moment. And then when you're in a dialogue scene, I think the most important thing in a dialogue scene is knowing when not to cut. I mean, the nice thing when you're working with really great actors is you can stay on them, and you can let a shot play out. I mean, there's a scene in this movie where Toby's basically confessing that he feels he's responsible for the death of Uncle Ben, and the shot of Toby with his speech was most powerful without any cuts at all.
It happened so fast. I won the money and the guy wouldn't pay me. Then he got robbed. The thief was running towards me. I could have stopped him, but I wanted revenge.
I mean, there's, I think, one cutaway to Aunt May at a certain point in the scene, but otherwise it's just, a minute of Toby just basically telling the story. And it's nice when you can do that. And then you can just study the actor and the nuances of his emotion and performance. When I got in the footage for this montage, which it comes at a point in the movie where, Peter Parker has had so many bad things happen to him, and he's just so held down and so miserable for so long that he can't take it anymore, and finally he just gives up being Spider-Man, and he's free and doesn't have any responsibilities and can just live life as a normal human. It was like the first piece of music I went to for whatever reason, and I cut it in. I put the scene together, and I didn't even really cut the scene to it, and I went home and got the CD. I thought, I'm going to put that Raindrops Keep Falling on My Head because it's just like the epitome of these kind of scenes, and for some reason it just really worked. It caught all the cuts in some magical way. I mean, there were a couple cuts that I needed to adjust a frame or two, but pretty much the version of that scene that's in the movie is like the very first cut of that scene.
Sorry.
And it feels like a huge amount of weight has been lifted off the character, and for the first time in his life since he's become Spider-Man, he's just truly free and has no worries in the world. I hope it's going to be introduced to a new generation of moviegoers who can be tortured by it as much as I was when I was a kid.
Nothing's worrying me.
Sam actually we work pretty closely together, and especially on a big effects movie like this. The sort of nightmare of it is that it never really ends. I mean, on most movies, the footage gets shot, and at that point you have a finite amount of material to work with, and you're sort of working with the same dailies over and over, just basically honing it down, trying to figure out the best takes and the best performances and the structure of the scenes. But when you're done shooting, you're far from done because there's so many visual effects shots that are constantly evolving and changing that every day we would have a 2 to 3 hour visual effects meeting at SPI, Sony Picture Imageworks, which is our effects company, where we would see anywhere from 20 to 60 shots, all in various states of completion, from like rough early previses to beginnings of lighting and so on and so forth. So we were constantly having to give feedback on those shots. Every day was like getting new dailies. And then having to bring back those 20 to 60 shots, cut them into the movie, and see how they worked within the material that we already had. It was incredibly important to have a good visual effects editor. And Jody Fidel, who I've known for years, is a fan of all this kind of stuff and is just somebody who is totally in love with his work and obsesses over effects.
Bob would be cutting, but effects were always coming in, so I would have to put together a sequence. I'd take one of Bob's sequence, cut the newest shots in, go to set with the tape, and show it to set on Sam in between setups. He'd give notes, I'd take notes, I'd get them back to SPI and John Dykstra.
And seeing if they worked okay or whether we needed something different, whether Spider-Man was too fast or the action was too slow or the framing was right, the movement within the shot to cut from shot number 1, which was a shot we already had, and shot number 3, which was a shot we already had, and this was the shot in the middle. It was a great crew, and everybody just really worked together and just cared about making the movie the best it could be. Surprisingly, there was very little footage that wasn't used. There were just a few dramatic scenes that we thought would be better shorter. Scene in the backyard between Toby and Kirsten, where they have sort of a romantic interchange that we always liked, but we felt it was within the pace of a summer action movie, that it might be too much. So we pulled footage out of that. And there are just a couple other scenes. There's another scene between Peter Parker and the Russian girl who lives next door, the girl Ursula. It's a scene I always liked, but it didn't really fit into the end of the movie.
Woo! Woo! Whoa!
In a movie like this, there's no corners cut in terms of, getting what you need to do the job correctly, and then everybody sees it. So it's really gratifying on that level. Just being able to go to the theater when the movie opens and hearing the reaction of the audience, which is, kind of what it's all about,
Our, if you want to call it a mantra, really was that the worst shot in the new movie has to be as good as the best shot in the last movie, because there's always a worse shot. And the challenge, of course, is that not only has Spider-Man raised the bar over the course of the intervening years, but other movies have come out which have been incredibly successful and had some beautiful and spectacular technical breakthroughs. The challenge for us is that we have a moving target, and not only is it a moving target, we have to project into the future how high the bar is going to be. It isn't just about a bar that's sitting here today. It's about a bar that's going to be a certain height when we release this film. Well, we started where we left off in the first film, which is daunting, because I think we were really successful with the things that happened in the first film, both visually and storytelling-wise. We had a new villain, a very good villain, I think a very challenging villain, and we also had to show our character in the flesh.
Doing the data or the photo acquisitions that we did on Tobey Maguire and Alfred Molina both had to happen very early on. Building those two characters for the movie they're two hero characters for the film, and to be able to do the shots for the movie, we need to start by building the characters and having them ready to put into shots. So it was probably one of the first development efforts that we had to embark on.
John worked with Tobey Maguire, I worked with Alfred Molina, and we essentially directed them in facial performances of different ranges of emotion with motion capture.
We measured every inch of their body, we cyber scanned every inch of them from head to toe. We did a lot of motion capture on their movements, facial expressions, how they open and close their eyes, how they smile, how they frown, pretty much all of the range of emotions that we could get. We had them read lines from the script so we could capture performance of how they might say different lines of dialogue. Pretty much anything that we could capture in terms of photographic elements or data elements through motion capture, we did.
And then we took that data and applied that to the CG model so that every time you see them in a fight sequence, if you stop and you go through slowly, you'll see all these different facial expressions on the characters. The shot that's probably has to be, the proof in the pudding is the one at the end when they're in the pier and Doc Ock pulls down the fusion machine and the crescents down into the water and essentially drowns himself. The camera has him, he's full screen, and he's all CG, everything in the shot is CG, and he drifts away down into blackness ultimately.
We had discussed the potential of having Alfred do this underwater fall away, okay? It became cumbersome at best. So we decided to make the character into a computer-generated character. And that was one of our big challenges in the making of this movie. This is a close-up. We have to actually make believable Alfred Molina, Doc Ock, in the flesh, in this close, at the beginning of the shot and take him away from camera. And add to that, he's got to be underwater, which is kind of a unique deal.
Doctor, we have a successful fusion reaction.
For the fusion device, we knew it had to be a strong visual image that conveyed a lot of energy and a lot of potential energy. And there's a line in the story where Alfred says, "I've got the power of the sun in the palm of my hand." And we used that as a springboard for our inspiration. What we did is we looked for a lot of reference photography of the sun. And what we found is that when people photograph the sun, you get these fascinating images that are really not blown out like we traditionally see the sun, but show a lot of the detail of the gases on the surface of the sun. And so we used those as a guide and ended up building up from the surface and out to the gas prominences.
Well, they're going to do shot 74, which is this wall here imploding into Ox Machine.
This particular miniature shot is complex in that we have a number of practical effects that are working with the miniature photography as well. And since you're on a small scale, this is all done in quarter scale. And because it's so small, everything has to be in a very condensed area.
What you can't tell by looking at the model out there on the water is that it's actually up on a steel platform supported from below the water level. And so during the shot, the building's going to sink down some, and the walls are going to, Ox Machine inside is going to lash out, and the energy slice through the building, and then the building will suck in.
This is a shot and really the whole sequence which combines both miniature photography and CG work. So they're not separate of each other, they're combined. And really one of the arts in visual effects now is understanding photographic means and computer means and how to blend them together, and that's really the best way to get the most dramatic effects.
It was decided that there was going to be an elevated train sequence in this movie, and of course there's no elevated train in contemporary Manhattan.
Initially, I think the train sequence was probably the most daunting because it was the most fleshed out in the script, and it was easy to see and to be able to read between the lines early on that there was going to be a lot of CGI work involved. The train sequence was one that immediately jumped out at everybody as something that was very large that we may not have enough time to finish if we didn't start on it right away.
It became clear early on in the design of the train sequence that we were going to need a lot more than just plates from New York with trains added. We decided the quantity of work dictated that we should probably shoot some real trains somewhere. And research brought us to the Loop in Chicago, which has contemporary high-rise buildings, which has an elevated train, and it's not altogether that different than the kinds of cars that would have or could have run on tracks for an elevated train in Manhattan.
We got on board really early just trying to plan the logistics of that and trying to determine how one might take Chicago footage, blend it with New York footage, blend it with CGI, buildings and atmosphere and street elements and that sort of thing to put together a scene that played as if it was shot in New York, or was taking place entirely in New York.
So we went to Chicago, and it did a lot of things for us. One is it gave us incredibly good reference for railroad tracks, what the trains looked like, how they moved, all of the things that we need to have to create those same items from scratch. But we put 16 cameras on a railroad car, and that was our train. We drove it around the Loop. There were other trains on the Loop. We had our own conductor and everything, and we drove this elevated train bristling cameras around and around and around. Those plates became backgrounds for running shots, where there's images outside the windows, images across the top of the car where the camera has limited motion. We did a spider cam shot using a real Chicago train, a real stretch of Chicago street, where the camera starts out close on the characters and pulls back to reveal the train pulling away. So we got as much of the material as we felt could be gotten in the Chicago environment, and that kept us from having to create all those buildings and all those trains and all those tracks for those shots.
The train sequence is fairly difficult because you're always trying to get the right direction, get a good plate that matches. Sometimes it's a completely CG shot, but wherever you can, you use a real train, that was set on rockers and different things that the mechanical effects guys would put together to make the train shake like a real train.
There's lots of stuff in the train sequence where there's combinations of CGI characters with live action train. Some cases there's live action characters shot blue screen on top of CGI train with a live background or a CGI background. So it's like a giant mix and match.
Certainly when they're fighting on the side of the train, that was difficult in the sense of trying to have laws of physics of gravity apply to them. Even if their feet can stick, they're going to be affected by gravity. And this shot definitely involved a lot of trying to get the exact right feel of how gravity would affect that. The right strength and look in the tentacles and everything else is, it's a big job. It's a big job. It was one of the more difficult sequences.
We knew we had to have a convincing CG version of Alfred Molina as Doc Ock, so the first thing we started with was the tentacles. And we worked with the company Edge Effects, who was building the practical puppeteer tentacle, and we took their model and scanned it and looked closely at what was going on with the shading and surface textures of the real model. We replicated that in CG.
Certainly the tentacles themselves presented a problem because I think they're unique, and I don't think that there's anything in nature. There are things maybe close, but nothing really substantial to give some sort of reference to go off of.
Every shot that had tentacles in was a decision about whether to use puppets or to use an animated tentacle. What we did was on the day while we were shooting, if it was a shot we thought we could do puppets, we'd try it, we'd go for it. We'd put him in there, hook Doc Ock up to a harness, which was pretty heavy, have him go through his actions, and if it worked, it was great, we got it in the can, we moved on. In some cases we said, hey, it's going to take too long to set up, let's get a CG version. The other thing, there were some shots were just from the get-go we knew had to be CG. Biggest lesson I think we learned on Spider-Man 2 was just to be prepared to recreate a lot of different environments and a lot of performances later.
I guess basically that you can never have enough preparation. I mean, the terrible thing is that the work always expands to fill the time given to do something. But what I've learned is with the riches of being able to do anything, one of the things that you have to do is you have to be real specific about what you want to do. Because if you're not careful, you can execute a bunch of mediocre stuff, and you can do it really quickly, and lots of it, right? So what you really have to do is pick out those moments where you can craft something, so it sets itself apart. That's the kind of stuff that you need to focus on. That's what I learned was, that's where I want to focus, on creating those moments.
I understand you use harmonics of atomic frequencies.
Sympathetic frequencies.
Harmonic reinforcement?
Go on.
You've tried to, I think, evolve the sounds, because I think anyone that makes a movie, you look back at your movie, and it's like, there's maybe a couple of things you want to do a little different.
Basically, everything on the picture that moves, I try to provide a sound for it. When you're doing a movie that's a comic book type movie, there are no rules. You can do anything, and anything can make any sound.
There's less time, almost always, on a sequel than the original. At least the 3 I've done have all been tighter schedules. So the pressure is actually higher, and there's usually more music.
We listened to what they had in the first movie, and I asked the director and the picture editor what they like and what they felt can be improved upon, and then we make some decisions on what we should attempt to make better.
He is relatively new to supervising, although he's been sound designing for films for a long time, and he stepped up to the plate and did an incredible job creating some magnificent sounds for this movie.
I think my approach of sounds in general, I like very organic, real sounds, not synthetic sounds, and that's one of the design aspects of, I think, the whole movie that we spoke about very early on. And like for Doc Ock, for instance, in this movie, he has his tentacles. So we had some discussions if they were going to sound like they had like servos in them or not, and then we decided that it shouldn't have, because now it made it. If you had servos in the tentacles, it sounded more like they were a different part of him. And if we went without the servos, we felt they sounded more like they were connected with Doc Ock himself. It was a part of him. Yes. I will start with a scene that I think a scene that had most of the movements going to be in the movie, and I just laid out rough templates. For the metallic spine, I got like the biggest motorcycle chain I can find, and so a lot of the movements is from that. And then some old piano wires, which are very strong wires. You can do a lot to them without breaking them. And use that for a lot of the fluidness of the arm instead of not having, like in lieu of having a servo motor. So he's mostly made up by motorcycle chains and piano wires.
And now on to the main event. Give me the blue light.
There's a fusion machine in the movie here. That's a big part of the plot. So I started out with an opera singer for this fusion ball. It's basically only her voice and my own voice. I need to start with very pure sounds to be able to make harmonics like you would build like an orchestration. On a movie like this, you would love to be able to record every single thing, but you have a car passing by you 200 feet away. It's, I use something I record from another movie or from a canned library, but for these specific things, I really try to make it all from scratch,
Okay, let's do a playback, Brian. It's kind of like painting a picture, and whatever's moving on the screen, I'll record each sound individually, and we record those track by track, and then when you play it back, it's in sync with the picture. And when you're done, it's a wall of unique sound that's contributed to the film. It's all created on the Foley stage, basically with hand props and with nothing. There's no pre-recorded sound effects. These two ingredients, actually, believe it or not, were part of what we used on Spider-Man 2 for the web attach sounds. This is a little bit of leather pieces that I cut here. They're thin little strands. They give a whipping sound, and then when the web attaches, this is actually 1/4-inch audio tape. This gives just a little bit of a web sound, stretchy sound. Whenever the web hits on a surface, then we kind of hit it like this. they're recording sound when it's on the film, on location. They're concentrating on the actor's dialogue, which is the most important. And a lot of those sounds go away because the boom mic only picks up certain sounds. And so we go back to enhance the film, make it more dynamic, more interesting. Hollywood tends to pump up sound, so they want it just to be more intense for the theaters.
Okay, actually, I know it looks like I'm putting together a lot of junk here, but each one of these things gives a different sound to it. Okay, kind of what we use for the claw, this is basically, it's got a little bit of movement with it. It looks like a shotgun, but anyway, this is a frequency here. It's a move, I call it like a movement thing. And then this machete actually gives the ring of the claw because it's metallic, so you want a nice ring. So this car door is giving me the weight. This fence here, this steel fence, is giving me the steel sound. And then this echo, this metal box here actually just gives it just a teeny bit of echo. And then the mixer is using his audio outboard gear in there and making all of these items, bringing them lower in octave, making them beefy and thick. Now we got to come up with the sound of the screech of when the door pulls out. So, this is actually a hubcap on this car door, and it makes an irritating screech sound. Give me one more, Brian. One more.
When you put these sounds with the sound effects, then you have your whole sound presentation for the film.
Well, I know that they had early meetings. Danny and Paul got together as far as understanding the palette of sounds that were being designed and creating those sounds and where effects were going to live and where music was going to live. One of the things Kevin and I work so hard to try to do is to pick and choose and create so that there is not a train wreck, if you want to call it that, between music and effects through the course of a film.
My approach when I design it or we cut the sounds for the scene, we will back it off and make it less intrusive for the sake of the music. Or maybe Danny saying, I like to do something big with higher strings here. Then in the frequency register, I try to stay out of those type of sounds. So I will just try to complement what he's doing for those scenes.
The hardest part of the process is coming up with the tone of the film the first time and the main themes, and that part just drives me nuts. So I don't have to go through the same kind of torturous thing, but instead I'm going to be able to do variations, and variations are always kind of fun. Now where do I take something and turn it into something fresh or something I haven't done or something that I wanted to do on the first one but never got an opportunity to do. In the beginning, it's always like dipping into a well, and you have no idea how far down you have to go. So it's kind of like, I'm lowering that bucket again, and as many times as you do it, you just never know. Am I going to hit water right away? Or am I going to be like looking for more rope and more rope and more rope and still going, there's nothing down there. So that's the hardest part. It's that mystery each time. I've once described it because I was watching a painter friend of mine prepare to get into a body of work, and he spent a long time getting all of his colors and pigments all lined up and all organized all together. And before he started a single painting, and while I watched him work, I realized that's exactly what I do in the beginning. And then when that's all completely laid out, it's all organized, I create a thing called a template, and I got all these sounds. Oh, that sounds. Oh, I think I'm gonna be able to use that. I need something metal, and I'll go through and I'll listen. Yeah, that's gonna work. So I'll just lay it all out, and then I'll finally start writing the first cue. I look for the biggest scenes to score first, but not action scenes. Action scenes are very time-consuming, but they're not the ones that the rest of the score is going to revolve around. I'm going to look for the big, dynamic scenes, the big emotional scenes. I'll usually pick something in the middle of the movie that's a turning point. There's usually some big scene where there's a major conflict develops. Because I know that if I can capture the most difficult cue in the movie, then I could back up from there and go, that worked out really well. Now I could go back to the top of the film and start working, not necessarily in order, but as much as I can. But I know where it's going because I've already developed what I'm now going to start playing with in the beginning into its full-blown version, and I already am confident that it's going to work well. We'll score like Spider-Man 2. There's 60 starts, 85 minutes, 60 different pieces of music. I'm going like a freight train, but I really depend on some help to keep myself organized on the backside. Otherwise, I'll forget whole cues. It all starts to seem like a kind of a nightmarish puzzle. Like all these pieces are flying all over. And then with luck, knock wood, there's a point where they just seem to come together. And that's the best moment. I don't think there's any rules for any kind of movies. I mean, that's what I learned from my master, who was Bernard Herrmann. Growing up on his music, I learned very early on that there were no rules, period. It's just whatever rules you make up. If it works, it works.
When you speak with the composer early on and the director, what the approach is, I think it makes it easier to make a great mix at the end of it, which is all our goals, to make this as a very good sounding movie.
Having been through the first one with Sam, we really had an understanding as to how he likes to mix and how selective he likes to be about what he hears and when. In true comic book fashion, there's a lot of wham, bam, pow type of sequences through this film. And wherever we can get quiet, it's very effective for the movie as an overall run.
I mean, if you look at the movie, there's so many things visually happening at one time. You can't hear everything at one time, so we need to focus on what we do want to hear. And that's what I think was one of our biggest challenges on this one, was to try to be more focused on what we do want to hear versus what we don't want to hear.
Wait a second.
Doc Ock's a pretty noisy guy, and everywhere he goes, he makes a statement.
He makes quite a bit of noise.
He makes a lot of racket. You know when he's coming.
Peter Parker and the girlfriend.
A huge challenge on this movie was trying to decide what's carrying the emotion of the scene better, the sound effects or the music. And it's pretty much a 50-50 trade-off in this movie, which is I would say leaning more towards the effects and than most movies we work on. A lot of movies drive the action sequences with music. This is pretty much driven, I'd say 50-50 with sound effects.
In terms of this work and this job is that we still have a lot of fun doing it, and Sam's a lot of fun to work with. The whole crew has been, it's been enjoyable. There's the stress of getting it done obviously has been what it is, but we've had a good time doing it, so that's a big plus.
Just make sure when you watch this DVD that you click on the 5.1 presentation so that you get the full sense around sound.
Exactly.
You'll dig it.
Yeah.
Flannery O'Connor said this thing about endings, but I think it should be true about sequels. We could apply it to sequels, that they should be surprising but inevitable. So the goal is always to do things and have scenes that the audience couldn't write, but that when you get to the end, you think, oh, of course, that was where the story had to go.
All the movie wants is for people to like it. Please like me, you know. It just wants to provide entertainment and be a moral, proper story for kids.
These are people who love this material, genuinely love the material. They're very knowledgeable about it, and they deserve the best.
I really think Sam is just a great filmmaker, and he really displays that in this movie. I mean, he didn't just like, oh, make a better film. Oh, this is better than the first one. I mean, he whooped the first one's ass, you know what I mean?
I felt like it would be a special film because it's the kind of comic book character that, you know, many people can relate to, and we have like a great story as well as like the action and everything. It's such a dramatic film.
It's a testament to Stan Lee and Steve Ditko and their initial vision that they create a character that lasts so long and transcends cultures.
This one was tough to make because of time, but great satisfaction.
These are tough and scary times, and during these times, we always look to stories of heroes to show us the way and to give us hope. And maybe that has something to do with why the audience right now is so taken with Spider-Man.
They're characters with whom the audience can relate.
The universe is rich. So going to story 3, it's they're like in a candy store.
I think we've set the seeds with the ending of the piece so that the audience will have a great deal of expectation for what will happen in part 3.
I'm in the movie, I'm involved with the whole process, and I want to know what happens, you know?
Hi, I'm Sam Raimi.
And I'm Alfred Molina, Doc Ock, for those of you who haven't been paying attention.
We hope you've enjoyed the preview, but trust me, when Spider-Man 2 hits the theaters, there'll be plenty more surprises.
Sam and I had a lot of fun making this movie. We were trying to think of something special to leave you fans with. Alfred, can you... Oh, that's your line, isn't it? Sorry about that. I got all excited. That's the most dialogue I've had in weeks.
Hi, I'm Sam Raimi.
And I'm Alfred Molina, Doc Ock, for those of you who haven't been paying attention.
Right, it's my line. Okay, sorry. I'm sorry.
It's tough, isn't it? It's fucking tough, isn't it?
All right.
Remember this, next time it's take 27.
All right, I will, buddy.
Next time there's like take 8, I'm gonna shout out, "Hi, I'm Sam Raimi." And this horrible memory will come flooding back. That's actually, I'll do that. When you start talking to me, I'll look at you.
Now, let me get your idea straight. When I'm speaking to you, you're actually going to look at me?
Yeah.
That may actually make it seem like you're listening to me.
Yeah.
All
Call me
right, good.
crazy.
That-
What's this little thing? Thing you did?
Just in case they want a fake introduction.
All right, I might
See,
try.
some actors will just, yeah, like we're just coming into it.
Yeah, I'll try that.
Okay, ready? Here we go. Hi, I'm Sam Raimi.
And I'm Alfred Molina. It's actually, it does work, doesn't it? It's very good. Let's do it again.
Let's just put it like this. It worked for me. When I saw you do it.
No, it's very good.
Okay, let's go. Ready?